The air hung heavy with possibility as Ada stood frozen amid the chaos of Lagos traffic. Blaring horns and shouts of street vendors faded to silence in her mind as the weight of her decision pressed down on her shoulders like the humidity that clung to her silk blouse. Across Broad Street, the towering Unity Tower cast long shadows as the afternoon sun began its descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold that reflected off the windows of surrounding buildings. A Danfo bus swerved dangerously close, its yellow paint chipped and faded, the conductor hanging precariously from the doorway, shouting, "Yaba! Yaba!" The smell of exhaust mingled with the aroma of roasting plantains from a nearby street vendor. Lagos, in all its chaotic glory, surrounded her. Yet Ada had never felt more alone. "Are you coming or not?" Paul's voice cut through her thoughts, impatient and edged with the tension that had characterized their interactions lately. He stood, several paces ahead, his crisp white shirt still immaculate despite the heat that made others wilt. His success as a doctor had always been evident in his bearing, confident, assured, entitled to the respect he routinely received. Ada had played by the rules all her life. A first-class degree from the University of Lagos, where she had been her faculty's valedictorian. A rising star at Unity Bank, where, at 28, she'd already secured the coveted position of assistant marketing director. Her engagement to Paul, the man her family had subtly guided her towards since their university days, was the crowning achievement in her parents' eyes. The perfect Igbo doctor for the perfect Igbo daughter. Their families were already planning the traditional wedding in Anambra. Her mother had started collecting wrappers and coral beads for the ceremony, while the men discussed bride price negotiations over palm wine during Sunday visits. The date was set for December, just 6 months away, chosen to coincide with the holiday season, when relatives from America and Europe would return to Nigeria. Her father, Professor Okafor, never missed an opportunity to mention his future son-in-law's accomplishments. "Did you know Paul is being considered for chief resident next year?" he would announce to visitors, his chest swelling with pride, as though Paul's achievements were extensions of his own family legacy. And perhaps they were. The alignment of two respected Igbo families represented everything her parents had worked towards since fleeing Biafra as children during the Civil War. "Ada, the traffic will only get worse," Paul called again, checking his expensive watch, a gift from his uncle in London. "I'm coming," she replied, stepping forward into the crosswalk, feeling as though she were moving toward an execution rather than her fiancé. But fate, or perhaps Ada's long-suppressed true self, had other plans. 2 weeks earlier, Toby had arrived in her life like a sudden rain during Harmattan. Unexpected, refreshing, impossible to ignore. Their first meeting across a conference table during a marketing presentation for the bank's new youth-focused product had sparked something neither expected. Toby, with his creative agency's fresh approach, had challenged her conservative banking instincts. "Your target audience doesn't want another stuffy financial product," he had said, his confident voice carrying across the boardroom. "They want a bank that understands their dreams." His presentation showed young Nigerians pursuing entrepreneurship, education, travel, lives full of possibility rather than mere financial security. Something in his words had resonated with a dormant part of her soul. What began as professional admiration evolved into stolen moments. Coffee meetings that ran late at the artsy cafe in Victoria Island. Text messages exchanged at midnight when Paul was on call at the hospital. The brush of hands across a desk that sent electricity through her veins when they reviewed campaign materials together. Toby represented everything her parents had warned against. Yoruba. Raised Muslim, though now secular, creative rather than professional. His dreadlocks and casual attire would never fit into the conservative banking world she inhabited. Yet his mind created magic that her structured thinking could never produce. "I have been thinking about the rollout strategy," he had said during their third meeting, though they both knew the strategy had been finalized days earlier. "Could we discuss it over dinner?" She should have said no. Instead, she heard herself saying, "I know a quiet place in Lekki where we won't be disturbed." That dinner had stretched into hours of conversation, where, for the first time in years, Ada felt truly seen. Not as Professor Okafor's accomplished daughter, or Paul's appropriate fiancée, but as herself, with dreams and doubts she'd never voiced aloud. Now, a week later, as she joined Paul at a roadside stand, where he purchased the Financial Times from a young boy, her phone vibrated in her purse. She knew without looking that it was Toby. He had sent messages throughout the day, each one more urgent than the last. "Ready for dinner with my parents?" Paul asked as they walked toward his parked Mercedes, apparently having forgotten his earlier irritation. "Mother has been cooking all day. She's making your favorite, offensala." Ada nodded, her throat too tight for words. Her phone vibrated again, insistent as her conscience. When they reached the car, she excused herself to check her messages. 2 texts demanded impossible choices. "Meeting my parents tonight. Mother has been cooking all day. She wants to discuss wedding dates. Don't forget to bring the fabric samples." Paul, sent earlier that morning. "I've never known anyone like you. This isn't just an affair. This is real. I need to know if you feel the same way. I can't keep doing this if you're going to marry him. Please, Ada, choose us." Toby Lagos whispered when you stepped outside the lines. Ada knew this truth in her bones. In her parents' social circle, marriages didn't fail. They endured, regardless of happiness. Cross-cultural relationships invited unnecessary complications. A proper Igbo woman knew her place and her people. Yet she found herself drawn deeper into the labyrinth of her desires, unable to silence the voice that had awakened inside her. With Paul, she was the woman her parents raised her to be: dutiful, respected, secure. Their relationship was comfortable, like the familiar pounded yam and egusi soup her mother prepared every Sunday. She knew exactly where their life would lead. A spacious home in Lekki, membership at the exclusive Lagos Country Club, 2 children in private schools, holiday trips to London, eventual political aspirations for Paul with her as the perfect supportive wife. With Toby, she discovered the woman she might become: passionate, authentic, free. He took her to poetry slams in Surulere and Indi, film screenings in Yaba, where they debated philosophy until dawn broke over the Lagos Lagoon. He asked about her dreams, not her 5-year career plan, but the whispers of her heart she'd been taught to ignore. The contrast haunted her dreams and followed her through her waking hours. "Everything all right?" Paul asked as she returned to the car, his tone suggesting he already suspected it wasn't. "Just work," she lied, sliding into the passenger seat and feeling the cool air conditioning as a welcome relief from the heat and her own burning guilt. At dinner with Paul's parents in their palatial home in Ikeja, Ada pushed food around her plate, while her future mother-in-law, Grace, discussed wedding details with the certainty of a military strategist. Paul's father, Joseph, a retired judge, occasionally interjected with questions about her father's health or comments about the current political climate. "The governor has promised to address the flooding in Victoria Island," he remarked, cutting his fish with surgical precision. "Though I'll believe it when I see it." "Speaking of the island," Grace said, turning to Ada, We've been looking at properties in Ikoyi for you two, close enough to the hospital for Paul's work, yet suitable for raising children in a secure environment. Ada's phone vibrated against her thigh. She had received 6 messages from Toby since arriving at dinner, each one increasingly desperate. The last simply read, "I'm outside your apartment. I'll wait all night if I have to." "Excuse me," she said, rising abruptly. "I need to use the restroom." In the opulent guest bathroom, Ada stared at her reflection in the gold-framed mirror. Who was this woman with perfect makeup and a designer dress, who looked as though she were drowning from within? She typed a quick response to Toby. "Can't talk now. With his family. Don't wait for me." His reply was immediate. "I'll wait forever if that's what it takes." The weight of 2 futures pressed against her chest, making it difficult to breathe in the perfumed air of the bathroom. When she returned to the table, Paul gave her a concerned look. "You look pale. Are you feeling well?" Before she could answer, Grace interjected, "It's probably just wedding nerves." "I was the same way before I married your father. I actually broke out in hives the week before. The pressure of planning the perfect day can be overwhelming." Ada forced a smile. "You're probably right." But Paul's eyes narrowed slightly, unconvinced. His medical training had taught him to observe symptoms, to look beyond surface explanations. Later, as he drove her home, he maintained an unusual silence. "Your mother's food was delicious," Ada offered, desperate to fill the growing void between them. "You hardly ate," he replied, eyes fixed on the road ahead. "In fact, you've been distant all evening, all week, really." He paused at a traffic light, the red glow illuminating his profile. "Is there something you need to tell me, Ada?" Her heart raced. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, his voice careful and measured, "that you've been checking your phone constantly. You barely engage in wedding discussions, and you look distracted. If you're having second thoughts—" "No," she interrupted too quickly. "It's just work pressure. This new campaign launch is consuming all my energy." Paul nodded, accepting her explanation too easily, and returned to silence as they continued toward her apartment. Had he always been this unquestioning of her? This willing to take her word as truth? Or was she only noticing now, in contrast to Toby's insistent probing of her thoughts and feelings? Secrets in Lagos had a way of surfacing, like bodies in the Lagos lagoon after a storm. 3 days later, Ada's cousin Chioma spotted her with Toby at the Palms Mall in Lekki, their hands intertwined as they laughed over ice cream, their body language unmistakable. The family phone tree buzzed with speculation, and by evening, Ada's mother, Rose, had called 5 times, her messages growing increasingly concerned. "Ada, call me immediately. Your Auntie Ngozi said Chioma saw you with a strange man today. What's going on? Think of your engagement. Think of your father's blood pressure. He's been taking his medication, but you know how he gets when he's upset." The carefully constructed facade began to crumble when Paul confronted her outside her office building at Unity Bank's headquarters on Broad Street. Rain began to fall around them, the sudden downpour typical of Lagos in the rainy season, sending pedestrians scurrying for shelter and creating a curtain of privacy around their confrontation. "Your cousin saw you," he said, hurt and angry, fighting for dominance in his voice. His white doctor's coat, which he still wore from rushing over during his lunch break, was getting soaked, but he seemed not to notice. "Tell me it's not true. Tell me you haven't been—" Thunder cracked overhead, drowning his words, but his eyes demanded truth. Droplets clung to his eyelashes as he blinked rapidly. Whether from rain or threatening tears, she couldn't tell. "I didn't plan this," Ada whispered, the rain mixing with tears on her cheeks. Her carefully applied makeup ran in rivulets down her face, her mask of perfection dissolving. I don't know what's happening to me, Paul. I just know I can't keep pretending. His face hardened, jaw clenching as he stepped back. Pretending? Is that what our 3 years together have been? A pretense? No, that's not what I meant, she said, reaching for him. But he moved further away, bumping into a street vendor who cursed under his breath before recognizing the tension and hurrying away. Do you love him? Paul asked, his voice barely audible above the drumming rain on the metal awnings above. Ada opened her mouth, then closed it. The truth was, she didn't know if what she felt for Toby was love or simply the intoxication of new possibilities. The chance to be someone different from the Ada everyone thought they knew. I don't know, she finally admitted. But I know this isn't fair to you. She slipped the engagement ring from her finger and held it out to him, the diamond catching the gray light of the stormy day. You deserve someone who doesn't doubt. Someone who can be what you need without question. Paul stared at the ring but didn't take it. Keep it for now, he said, his voice suddenly cold. Think carefully about what you're throwing away. 3 generations of my family will be at our wedding. My father has invited the governor. Your father's reputation at the university. He stopped himself, running a hand over his face to wipe away the rain. Just think, Ada. Think beyond this. Whatever this is. He turned and walked away, his white coat now transparent with rain, revealing the blue shirt beneath. Some choices tear us apart before remaking us whole. For Ada, the crossroads appeared not as 2 men, but as 2 versions of herself. The daughter who fulfilled expectations, or the woman who dared to write her own story. That night, alone in her apartment in a quiet corner of Victoria Island, Ada surrounded herself with the artifacts of her carefully planned life. Family photos, where she stood straight-backed and smiling in her graduation gown. Professor Okafor's proud hand on her shoulder. Mementos from her engagement party, where Paul had formally presented drinks to her family as tradition demanded. The traditional coral beads Grace had given her as a symbol of welcome daughterhood. On her table, her passport lay open, possibly incarnate. Beside it, a printed email from the bank's HR department confirmed that a transfer request to another branch would be considered, given her excellent performance record. Toby had offered escape, a new beginning in Ghana, where his agency's sister company wanted him to lead their creative department. Come with me, he had pleaded during their last secret meeting at the quiet end of Lekki Beach. Away from all this judgment, just us, discovering who we could be together. His eyes had reflected the setting sun, alive with possibilities she'd never dared imagine for herself. A knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. She knew, before opening it, that Toby would be standing there, rain-soaked and determined. I couldn't wait, he said simply. She let him in, this man who had upended her carefully ordered life. He stood dripping on her imported tile floor, looking simultaneously like her greatest mistake and her only salvation. Paul found out, she said. My cousin saw us at the mall. Toby's expression shifted from hope to concern. What happened? He confronted me, asked if I love you. A beat of silence stretched between them. And what did you say? He finally asked. I said I didn't know. Ada turned away, moving to the balcony doors, where she could see the rain cascading down the glass, distorting the city lights beyond. And that's the truth, Toby. I don't know what this is between us. I don't know if it's worth destroying everything I've built, hurting everyone who loves me. He moved behind her, close, but not touching. What about hurting yourself? Doesn't that matter too? She turned to face him. That's the problem. I've never considered myself separate from what my family wants for me. I've never had to choose between their happiness and mine, because they were always the same thing. Until now, he said softly. Until you, she corrected. Meanwhile, Paul sat in his car outside his own apartment building, unable to go inside, where his roommate would ask questions he couldn't answer. The engagement ring Ada had tried to return now lay in his palm. 3 carats of diamond that had cost him 6 months' salary. His pride warred with the love he still felt. Grace had called 3 times that evening asking about wedding preparations. Joseph had already boasted to colleagues about his son's perfect Igbo bride. The shame of a broken engagement would follow both families through their social circles like a persistent ghost. He started his car and drove toward Ada's building, determined to fight for what he had planned so carefully. But as he pulled into her street, he saw through the rain a man entering her building. Tall, with distinctive dreadlocks, partially covered by a hood. Toby. Paul sat for an hour, engine running, before finally driving away. Inside the apartment, Ada and Toby talked until dawn broke over Lagos, dissecting their feelings, their fears, their futures. They had not touched beyond a brief holding of hands, both aware that physical intimacy would only cloud the decision she needed to make with clarity. "Whatever you decide," Toby said as he prepared to leave. The early morning light painting her apartment in golden hues. "Know that you've already changed me. You've shown me what it means to want something so much that you would risk everything for it." As the day deepened, Ada stood on her balcony, watching the Lagos skyline shimmer under the morning sun. The truth she had only begun to acknowledge whispered louder than both men's voices. Her heart's deepest yearning was not for either man, but for herself. For the first time in 28 years, she allowed herself to consider what she wanted, not what was expected of her. 3 days later, she declined the transfer to her bank's Ghana branch that would have followed Toby. She also returned Paul's ring officially, placing it in his hand during a tearful meeting at the same restaurant where they'd celebrated their engagement. She ignored Rose's hysterical tears and Professor Okafor's stony silence when she informed them over dinner at their Ikeja home. "You will regret this foolishness," Professor Okafor had said, pushing away his untouched plate of jollof rice. "No man will value a woman who doesn't know her mind." "That's just it, Papa," she replied quietly. "I do know my mind now, perhaps for the first time." But she had also ended things with Toby, declining his invitation to Ghana despite the pain it caused them both. "I need to find myself before I can truly find someone else," she had explained. "If I follow you now, I'll just be exchanging one person's expectations for another's." Instead of either path laid before her, she requested a position at the bank's newly opened branch in Kano, far from Lagos society and its suffocating expectations. Her regional manager had been surprised but impressed by her willingness to pioneer a new challenge.